New Zealand may be known for its breathtaking landscapes and tranquil beauty, but lurking in the shadows of its history are tales far darker than you could imagine. Cemeteries, the final resting places of countless souls, are said to be home to restless spirits, eerie apparitions, and chilling whispers of the past. From ghostly sailors lost at sea to veiled figures mourning tragedies long forgotten, these haunted cemeteries are not for the faint of heart. Tonight, we take you on a spine-tingling journey to uncover 15 most haunted cemeteries in New Zealand. Are you ready to face the stories that might just keep you awake tonight? 1. Symonds Street Cemetery, Auckland. Nestled in the heart of bustling Auckland, Symonds Street Cemetery is a place that whispers tales of its dark past. By day, it seems peaceful, but as night falls, the air grows heavy with unease. One chilling story recounts the experience of a young man who ventured into the cemetery late one evening, drawn by the eerie beauty of the weathered headstones. As he wandered deeper, he felt a sharp drop in temperature, and an unsettling silence replaced the sounds of the city. Suddenly, he noticed a faint figure standing by an old grave. Dressed in tattered 19th century clothing, the figure seemed to glow faintly under the moonlight. The man froze, watching as the figure turned slowly to face him. Hollow eyes locked onto his, and the figure began to move toward him with slow, deliberate steps. Panicking, he turned to flee, but the sound of heavy breathing followed him all the way to the gates. When he looked back, the figure was gone. To this day, visitors report hearing whispers and feeling unseen eyes watching them as they explore the cemetery. Some believe the restless spirits of those displaced during road expansions still roam the grounds, searching for peace they will never find. 2. Waikumete Cemetery, Auckland. Waikumete Cemetery, the largest in New Zealand, is a place where the living and the dead seem to coexist uneasily. A chilling tale from this cemetery involves a groundskeeper who worked the night shift. One evening, as he walked past a row of graves, he heard faint crying. He followed the sound, expecting to find someone mourning. Instead, he saw a woman in a long white dress, kneeling by a grave. He called out to her, but she didn't respond. As he approached, the crying stopped abruptly, and the woman disappeared before his eyes. Shaken, he looked around but found no one. The grave she had been kneeling at was that of a young girl who had drowned decades ago. Visitors have since reported similar sightings, a woman in white, drifting silently between the headstones. Some claim to feel a cold hand brushing against them, or hear disembodied sobs in the stillness of the night. Waikumete Cemetery remains a place where the veil between the living and the dead feels unnervingly thin. 3. Karori Cemetery, Wellington. Karori Cemetery is one of Wellington's most haunted locations, and its chilling reputation is well-deserved. A famous tale involves a group of teenagers who decided to explore the cemetery during a full moon. They wandered through the graves, laughing nervously, until they stumbled upon a tomb that seemed unusually cold to the touch. As they stood there, one of them noticed a shadowy figure in the distance. Thinking it was another visitor, they called out, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to move toward them, gliding silently across the ground. The group panicked and ran, but one of them tripped and fell. When the others turned to help, they saw the figure standing over their friend, its face a ghastly blur of darkness. The friend later claimed they felt an icy grip on their arm, as though something was trying to pull them into the ground. Even now, visitors report strange shadows, sudden chills, and the feeling of being watched. Karori Cemetery's beauty hides a sinister presence that few dare to confront. 4. Northern Cemetery, Dunedin. Northern Cemetery. In Dunedin is a place of quiet desolation, but its serenity is often shattered by tales of ghostly apparitions. One chilling story tells of a woman who visited the cemetery to pay respects to a relative. As she stood by the grave, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Glancing around, she noticed a man in old-fashioned clothing standing under a nearby tree. His gaze was fixed on her, unblinking and unnerving. Feeling uneasy, she began to walk away, but the man started following her. His footsteps echoed louder than they should have in the empty cemetery. When she reached her car, she turned to confront him, only to find that he had vanished. Later, she learned that the tree where the man had stood was the site of a tragic hanging many years ago. Visitors now avoid that part of the cemetery, claiming it's cursed by the spirit of the man who met his end there. 5. Anderson's Bay Cemetery, Dunedin. Perched on a hillside, Anderson's Bay Cemetery offers a breathtaking view of Dunedin, but its haunted reputation makes it a place few visit after dark. One local legend speaks of a spectral woman who appears near a row of ancient graves. Dressed in black, with a veil covering her face, she is often seen standing silently, her head bowed in mourning. A man walking his dog at dusk once encountered her. At first, he thought she was another visitor, but when he got closer, his dog began growling and refused to move forward. The woman turned to look at him, and though her veil obscured her face, he could feel her piercing gaze. The air grew icy, and the man felt an overwhelming urge to leave. When he glanced back from a safe distance, she had disappeared. The story of the veiled woman has been passed down for generations, and many believe she is the spirit of a grieving widow who lost her family in a tragic accident. To this day, the veiled woman serves as a reminder that some sorrows linger long after death. 6. Makara Cemetery, Wellington. Hidden in the windswept hills outside Wellington, Makara Cemetery exudes an eerie isolation. The silence there feels unnatural, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves or the faint whisper of the wind. One of the most unsettling tales from Makara involves a local woman who visited the cemetery to tend to her husband's grave. As she arranged flowers, she noticed a faint sound, like someone softly calling her name. Startled, she looked around but saw no one. Shaking it off as her imagination, she continued her work. Moments later, she felt a cold breath on her neck. Turning quickly, she found herself face to face with a pale, translucent figure of a man. His hollow eyes seemed to bore into her soul, and before she could scream, he vanished into thin air. Since then, visitors have reported hearing disembodied voices and footsteps trailing behind them, only to turn and find no one there. Some say the spirits at Makara Cemetery are restless because of its isolated location, forever searching for peace in the cold, lonely hills. 7. Old Napier Cemetery, Napier. Perched on a hillside overlooking Napier, this cemetery is a haunting reminder of the 1931 Hawke's Bay earthquake, which claimed hundreds of lives. Among the countless graves, one story stands out. It's said that a young girl named Emily, who perished during the quake, still roams the cemetery, searching for her family. A night guard once recalled seeing a small figure in a white dress wandering between the graves. Thinking it was a lost child, he approached her, calling out. The figure stopped, turned slowly, and stared at him with empty, hollow eyes. Then, without a sound, she vanished into the shadows. Visitors often hear faint giggles or the sound of a child crying near her grave. Some claim to feel a tugging on their clothes, as if a small hand were reaching out. Old Napier Cemetery remains a place where the tragedy of the past lingers, refusing to let go of the present. 8. Christchurch Barbadoes Street Cemetery, Christchurch. As one of New Zealand's oldest cemeteries, Barbadoes Street Cemetery holds countless stories of sorrow and loss. But none are as chilling as the tale of the screaming shadow. A man once visiting the cemetery at dusk reported hearing a piercing scream echo through the grounds. Searching for the source, he saw a shadowy figure darting between the trees, moving unnaturally fast. When he tried to leave, the figure seemed to follow him, its presence growing heavier with each step. As he reached the gates, he turned one last time and saw the shadow rise into the air before vanishing. Locals believe this entity belongs to a woman who was tragically murdered nearby and whose spirit cannot find rest. Even in daylight, visitors speak of an oppressive feeling, as if the cemetery itself holds on to the pain and despair of those buried there. At night, few dare to enter, fearing they too might encounter the screaming shadow. Mount Street Cemetery, Wellington. Tucked away on a quiet hillside, Mount Street Cemetery seems peaceful at first glance. But the deeper you go, the more unsettling the atmosphere becomes. One of the most infamous stories involves a group of university students who decided to explore the cemetery one Halloween night. As they walked through the graves, they noticed a faint humming sound, like an old hymn being sung. The sound grew louder, and suddenly, a figure emerged from behind a large cross, a priest in tattered robes, his face pale and lifeless. He raised his hand as if to bless them, but his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. The students ran in terror, but one claimed to feel an invisible hand grip his shoulder, holding him back. When they finally escaped, they discovered scratches on his arm, as if claws had dug into his skin. Locals say the priest's ghost guards the cemetery, punishing those who dare disturb its sanctity. Southern Cemetery, Dunedin. Southern Cemetery is a sprawling graveyard that whispers tales of forgotten lives. One chilling story involves a young woman named Clara, who was buried here after succumbing to a mysterious illness in the 1800s. Legend has it that Clara's spirit roams the cemetery, searching for answers to her untimely death. A man jogging through the cemetery one evening noticed a woman in a long, dark dress standing by a grave. Thinking she was a visitor, he nodded politely, but she didn't respond. Moments later, he glanced back and saw her following him, her face hidden by a black veil. As he picked up his pace, he heard the sound of dragging footsteps behind him. When he finally turned around, she was gone, but the air around him was icy cold. Many believe Clara's spirit is trapped in the cemetery, doomed to wander until the mystery of her death is solved. 11. Lyttelton Anglican Cemetery, Lyttelton. Nestled on the hillside overlooking Lyttelton Harbor, this cemetery is as picturesque as it is chilling. One of the most haunting tales involves the ghost of a sailor who was buried there in the late 19th century. According to local legend, the sailor died in a tragic shipwreck and was never able to reunite with his family. A visitor once reported seeing a man in tattered sailor's clothing wandering aimlessly between the graves. The man called out to him, thinking he was lost, but the figure stopped, turned, and revealed a face twisted in anguish, water dripping from his clothing. The visitor froze as the figure pointed toward the harbor, then disappeared into thin air. Even now, people claim to see wet footprints on the cemetery's paths, despite the absence of rain. Others have heard the faint sound of waves crashing, even though the cemetery is far from the water. The sailor's restless spirit seems forever tied to the graveyard, yearning for the peace he was denied in life. 12. Oamaru Cemetery. Oamaru. Oamaru Cemetery, with its towering trees and worn headstones, has long been a hotspot for ghostly encounters. One story tells of a spectral woman in a black cloak who appears near an unmarked grave. Visitors often describe an overwhelming feeling of sorrow before they see her. One evening, a local historian exploring the cemetery at dusk spotted the woman kneeling by the grave. Thinking she was mourning a loved one, he approached to offer help. As he got closer, she looked up, and he saw her face, hollow eyes, and a mouth frozen in a silent scream. Before he could react, she vanished, leaving a chilling cold behind. Locals believe she is the spirit of a widow who died of heartbreak after her husband disappeared at sea. Her ghost is said to search endlessly for his grave, unable to find closure. Visitors to Oamaru Cemetery are warned not to linger after dark, as the widow's sorrow is said to linger long after she disappears. 13. Clifton Cemetery, Wellington. Clifton Cemetery, perched on a cliff overlooking the sea, is known for its eerie beauty and unsettling atmosphere. A well-known tale tells of a ghostly child who appears on stormy nights, wandering the cemetery in search of her family. One stormy evening, a couple walking through the cemetery saw a little girl standing by an old grave. She looked lost and was holding a small doll. When they approached her, she turned to them with a tear-streaked face and whispered, "Help me find them." Before they could respond, a loud clap of thunder shook the ground, and she vanished into the mist. The couple later discovered that the grave she was standing by belonged to a family who had died in a landslide a century ago. Since then, the little girl's ghost has been a chilling reminder of the tragedy. Many visitors report hearing faint cries or seeing the doll left on her grave, even when no one has been near it. 14. Waikouaiti Cemetery, Otago. Waikouaiti Cemetery is steeped in history, but its ghostly reputation comes from a series of strange encounters reported by locals. One of the most unsettling stories involves a shadowy figure that appears near the oldest section of the graveyard. A farmer walking through the cemetery at dusk once noticed the shadow moving unnaturally among the headstones. Thinking it was a trick of the fading light, he continued walking, but the shadow seemed to follow him. He quickened his pace, but the figure matched his speed, growing larger and darker as it drew closer. Suddenly, the farmer felt a freezing hand grasp his shoulder. When he turned, there was no one there, but the shadow loomed over him, its shape twisting in the darkness. He ran and didn't stop until he was far from the cemetery. Visitors now speak of the shadow as an omen, warning those who dare to linger too long. Some believe it is the spirit of an early settler, forever bound to the land he fought so hard to claim. 15. Hamilton East Cemetery, Hamilton. Hamilton East Cemetery, surrounded by ancient trees and crumbling gravestones, is a place where the past feels uncomfortably close. One of the most chilling stories is about a gravedigger who worked there in the early 20th century. He reportedly saw the same man standing by a particular grave every night for a week. Curious, the gravedigger approached the figure on the seventh night and asked why he was there. The man turned slowly, revealing a face pale and lifeless, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Before the gravedigger could react, the man whispered, "I'm waiting," and disappeared into the ground. Terrified, the gravedigger left his job and refused to return. Since then, people visiting that area of the cemetery report hearing whispers or feeling an icy presence watching them. Some claim to see the ghostly man standing by the same grave, his restless spirit forever waiting for something or someone. The stories of New Zealand's haunted cemeteries are as mesmerizing as they are terrifying. They remind us that history never truly rests, and some spirits linger, perhaps forever. Which of these cemeteries would you dare to visit? Or perhaps you've experienced something unexplainable yourself. Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more spine-chilling explorations into the paranormal. Until next time, remember to tread lightly, because you never know who or what might be watching.